equally wrapped up in serenity. At the time, the Ministry of Basic Education scorecard a huge success despite insecurity in the Star. To The Voice, Menebdube scores huge success against all odds. But the ACHIDI Inc. wants to know if quality education can rebuild what politics has destroyed. Government then summoned 600 SKP secondary school teachers hiding abroad in the Guardian Post. As COVID-19 continues spreading, so too are newspapers on an information war against the disease. Cameroon orders 5.3 million doses of American Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine, writes in-depth newspaper. Then Cameroon Tribune presents reasons why one shouldn't hesitate to take the vaccine. And journalists engage on how to communicate the right information on COVID-19 vaccine in the Herald Tribune. Alleged audit bench report on COVID-19 funds leaked in the Sun. The COVID-19 final audit leaked report is found on social media in the Horizon, and MRC strikes government over failed COVID-19 audit report presentation in the Guardian Post, especially as IMF sets to meet women leaders over Cameroon's COVID-19 funds theft in the Voice newspaper. Government then resolves to bolster fight against HIV, tuberculosis, malaria with 164 billion CFA francs grant in Cameroon Insider, a move seen by Cameroon Tribune as life-saving. For water and electricity deficit, MPs put pressure on Cameroon Tribune. 30 MPs then grill energy boss on acute deficit on electricity and water supply in the Horizon. To the Guardian Post, 30 MPs pepper Water and Energy Minister for 6 hours for persistent blackout. Then government seeks 800 billion CFA funds for electrification of rural communities on Newswatch. As the unfunded crisis in the northwest and southwest said to hamper action for gender equality in in-depth newspaper, The Voice questions if Commonwealth to finally discuss Cameroon. But the interest of the advocate is on results of a study that shows persons with disabilities neglected in humanitarian assistance in Northwest, just when the Eden quote Dr. Simon Munzu, 99% of Anglophones will vote for total independence in the Eden. Just when Bishop George Nkwo thinks military offensive on Operation Kumbo Clean could radicalize Anglophone youths in the Voice Weekender. Let's now end our press review with a story on Cameroon Tribune, where a 3-year-old little girl has died in Bepanda, Douala after receiving severe beatings from her aunt. According to Alliance Nubia of Cameroon Tribune, the aunt has been reputed for physically assaulting the little girl and had even been locked up 6 months ago for this act. After being beaten severely, the child became unconscious and was abandoned in the hospital after her death was pronounced. The forces of law and order hunted the aunt and her companion, who were later apprehended and are currently in custody. Until I come your way again, this is your Hour with the Press.
Thanks, Emanuela. Now, lady, you've been observing. You are a journalist. You've listened to what Emanuela said there. Your reaction?
Two things, Amoki, as far as I'm concerned. It has to do with COVID and the recent donation from Anglophone to the fight against malaria, tuberculosis, and there are three, actually. Because at the time when people thought that all attention has been diverted to the fight against COVID, the Anglophone comes to tell us that there is COVID, but yes, there's still malaria and there's still tuberculosis. And even in the discussions that are taking place concerning COVID in the papers, we should not be distracted by the recent cases against who has embezzled what. We should continue to focus on the pandemic, because in as much as we want to know how much has been spent or how much has been embezzled and it should come back, people should not forget that COVID is still around. People are still dying, so people have completely abandoned all the measures that are supposed to be taken to prevent themselves from getting contaminated by the disease, and we're all focusing on how much money has been put in and who stole what and who did not steal what. So health is a major concern. Generally, I'm very concerned with health issues and education issues, and each time there is a step that has been taken as far as providing health for not just Cameroonians but for the whole world, it's always a laudable initiative. So if the Global Fund is coming in now to inject a lot more money in the fight against malaria, I think it is good news not just for Cameroon but for Africa as a whole.
You said two issues. That's one.
Yeah, and the second one is child molestation. More and more we are hearing children being molested either by their relatives.
That's in Douala.
That's in Douala. And yesterday on the social media, I equally saw pictures of a young girl who was being maltreated by the stepmother also, and a young boy who was tied by the stepmother. More and more there are cases of child molestation. It calls to the responsibility of parents. Parents should learn to stay with their children. No matter how poor you are, no matter how difficult the times are for you, stay with your children. Avoid taking your children.
Apparently one of those cases was an orphan.
And but most of the time it is people who are close to us. You're living with an uncle, you're living with an auntie, and who doesn't want to stay with you. So no matter how bad, Professor Nkui is here, no matter how bad the situation is with us and our children, it is only you who can take care of your child. Nobody else can take care of your child better than you. So the earlier parents know, because most parents say, okay, I'm not doing well, your auntie is in town, can you go stay with your auntie, and so on and so forth. It is bringing a lot of problems, and the children are the one paying the price.
I would like Professor Nkui to be active who comes to Indira, because I saw you express some worry, some facial worry when that report was passing, Professor.
Yeah, I think domestic violence is probably not well reported, because actually it occurs probably daily. Take, for example, it was reported in the news where a man cut off the leg of his own wife.
Because of food.
Because of food.
Because
food.
What kind of food? He served him spaghetti, worms, whatever. But I think that the Ministry of Social Welfare...
It's now social affairs, bro.
Social affairs. Needs to monitor this, because it's increasingly, and probably the press is just reporting only the tip of an iceberg.
Thanks, Prof. I think we should look for a day to talk about this. Now, what attracted your attention, Indira?
Well, like Tabe mentioned, she was talking about the situation of child molestation. I think that caught my attention too. We talk about a 3-year-old child, that's still a baby. A child who is helpless, who can barely speak, who can barely defend themselves, is beaten to death by their hands. I think coming on the heels of the International Day of the Child, or the African child, I would say it's a cause for concern. Like she said, parents need to be more careful. Parents need to watch out more for their children. Why would a 3-year-old baby be with her aunts? Where are her parents? That is the question. Those are some of the questions we want to ask ourselves. Now, some parents have a hard time, staying around their children all the time. They have to go to work, they have to go to business. But watching over children as young as that, why would someone lay their hands on a 3-year-old child? There are correctional measures, there are different ways of correcting a baby who was that young, instead of, physically trying to correct that child. It has resulted to the death, and this is just one of hundreds of cases which happen underreported in Cameroon. There are many cases like this. Maybe neighbors, friends, relatives, or whoever who are living around situations like that, if they can report cases like this, then maybe we can start from there to control, child molestation in Cameroon.
Okay, that's it. Let's now go to the first topic we have today about ACHIDI, who was laid to rest yesterday. Jacob Anong, you were a young man when he was Prime Minister. Let's start with you. What do you know about ACHIDI?
Thank you, Moki. I beg your pardon for me to make this acknowledgement on this platform, that I want to acknowledge Professor Nkui's present here, especially, who has been my professor, my teacher in the University of Yaoundé 1. I think it's an express privilege, Prof, to be with you on platform this day. I want to add that my score here today will certainly be Prof's score too, because he taught me what I will be doing today. So what I will score here, if it's a pass mark, it's Prof's pass mark. If it's a field mark, it's Prof's field mark. So concerning ACHIDI, it's true, we were very young when he was Prime Minister, but records are there. We have read. I'm one of those who read so widely, and I've read so much about him. We've heard so much about him. I've researched before coming here on this program. I knew we had to say something about him because he's an icon in our country. He has been a hero for Cameroon. I realized that as a teacher that I am, Professor Pa ACHIDI ACHU, his name has to go into our honors in the GCE board, because I read and I found out that in 1992, Pa ACHIDI ACHU set up a commission in September 1992 to study and propose to the Prime Ministry how the GCE board can function, because the then London GCE board examination and evaluation board that was managing our results disappeared in 1990. And so there was crisis. There was a lot of mishaps with the results. People were complaining. Names were not coming up. Results were, the GCE itself was under-evaluated. Sometimes complaints from all left and right. So Pa, with his cool-headed mind, especially the fact that at that time, Cameroon was burning with the SDF clamoring for their results that they say they won, and there was national disorder and disobedience. So Pa took over power at a time when it was not easy, and we realized that there was no backboard, and the majority Francophone government that we have will not find it easy for the Anglophones. We were already on the streets at the time marching, and there were water cannons on people. Were clamoring that the GCE board should be given so that the Anglophones could manage their exams themselves. So I think it was extra wisdom from the gods of our land that guided Pa to set that commission on September 22 to make proposals on how the GCE board will function. And in 1993, he decreed the GCE board.
Thank you.
I want to say that there is a big lesson in that action. That's one of the fattest things I realized with Pa, to our Anglophone elites who are in government today, that Pa did that at a time when it was not easy. There was no backboard. He seduced the government, gave a backboard, and immediately after, he gave the Anglo-Saxon GCE board, which I want to say today has helped to stabilize, to keep our Anglo-Saxon culture, our educational realities as it is today.
Thank you. You appreciate Pa for the creation of the GCE board. Now, he just said Pa came at a time the country was burning, and he was such a calm man. Did you see any wisdom in his appointments, and during his stay as Prime Minister, did it help to solve the problems that you, at the time, Professor Nkui of the SDF party, were clamoring for?
I resigned from the SDF.
I said at the time.
The day I was appointed in the Constitutional Council.
That's what I said at the time.
So please don't associate me, because it has implications.
Okay.
Definitely, ACHIDI ACHU was probably an icon that moved into chaos. And he tried to bring reason to it. Whether it was the GCE board or whether it was the politics, where he's from Santa and his brother in SDF, Nijon Frundi, he had to survive within that climate. He called me and he said, please, as a university professor, please join us in a house in Bastos. And all of us, the Northwest elite, should reflect the issues that was at play. And I turned up in the meeting. It wasn't only the CPDM, but also this SDF and probably other parties. Therefore, his vision was to bring all political variations to reflect on the future of the country. And I thought it was really, really a foresight that please Cameroon can move forward if we are together. Number two, eventually his watchword was politics Nanjangi, please. And he applied our own cultural norms of cooperation, to be able to do modern politics. And I think probably he has left us to say politics is not a fight, but it is a communion of all.
Scratch my back and scratch her.
Yes, that's maybe
win-win.
it may be a win-win situation. Another word which is scratch my back and scratch my, it is again against our own cultural background.
It takes two to tango.
Exactly, to the tango.
Okay.
The second thing, let me, in terms of education, when he came, the Anglophones were toying around with the Bamenda University of Science and Technology, which was spearheaded by John Gofoncha. And he pushed the idea, and he continued to pressure probably the ministers of education to give a quitus for the university, and he eventually became the chancellor of the Bamenda University of Science and Technology.
Now, Tabinun Chong, what should the younger politicians learn, have as lessons from ACHIDI?
I heard someone talking on the radio this morning in his testimony concerning ACHIDI, and he was like, it's like many of us haven't learned anything, or other politicians haven't learned anything from what Professor Nkwi just described concerning ACHIDI. And indeed, I'm tempted to think like them, that many of us haven't learned, because I've had my own share of experience concerning his openness and his spirit of accommodating the other the other person, let me put it that way, or not just the other party. I've received him on the same platform with John Fundi on the same program. And that day, everybody was like, we're waiting to see what's going to happen on this program today.
I was going to fight.
So, how dare you? How did you come to that? And it was happening right in Santa. It was not even in Yaoundé. We were in the village, let me put it that way. And the two of them had to be on the program. I was surprised. He didn't say no. John Fundi didn't say no, and all of them were on the program, and at the end of the day, we went and had breakfast together. And that's how they ended. So it's just to tell you that spirit, you cannot know what the other person is thinking if once in a while you don't come together to share your ideas. Absolutely. You cannot know what the other person has as planned, because there are some things we cannot say in public. It is only when we meet in those informal sectors that we can share some things, and you even get to understand the other person better. You cannot do politics and all of you are at different ends. That is, you're at your end vibrating, the other person is vibrating that way, you have no point of divergence, you don't have anywhere you're meeting, especially for the same country. It means that all of you do not have the country at heart, because it is the two ideas that you put together to say, okay, well, whoever is in power, this is what we think is good for the country. So this is the idea we should all be forging ahead for. So it is not like I have my idea, you have your own, I have my party, you have your own. But if it is the interest of the country, I think anybody who is standing as a candidate wherever should know that if we have the country at heart, we should all have the same goal for the country, especially if the population is involved. So there is a lot to learn from this man. After that meeting in Santa, after that I never met him, but I hear of stories. People were having lunch in his house every day as if it was a feast. Yeah. And I'm like, who is this man who is offering lunch in his house every day?
Now, let's move out of this to get to the topic, but in 30 seconds, what should the younger generation of politicians be learning, or should have as lessons, notes from ACHIDI?
I can say I was very young when he became prime minister. I think I was still in primary school. I can only remember the ghost towns then. Everywhere was hot, and then all of a sudden this man was appointed. I remember singing his name. I didn't know him. Televisions were not it wasn't very common then. But I knew his name, Simon ACHIDI. And then growing up and then finding myself in the field of journalism, I have to talk about him all the time. I would say he's one man who who inspired so many people. I had the opportunity to meet him once or twice, and I would say he was a very warm person. He was, besides being a politician, I would say he was a father figure, because he always tried to advise, even when we met him to talk about work, to talk about politics, to talk about Cameroon. He wanted to always give advice. He wanted to tell you what he thinks the younger generation should do, to make Cameroon a better place. He always talked about education. So I would say maybe those who can read back on ACHIDI, there are lots and lots of articles on ACHIDI on the internet to know who exactly he was. To know he was not just a politician, but he was also a father figure. I didn't have the opportunity to meet him many times, but the few times I did, I took lessons from him.
I want to thank you very much. We are taking a break, and when we come back, we shall be talking about the practice of journalism in Cameroon. Let's have a break. Joe Chebongen Kalabus has taken over as the chairperson of the National Communication Council. He's coming to put order from the instructions of the Prime Minister to a profession that is in chains, so to speak. Now, I want us to look at the practice of journalism in Cameroon right now. I'm going to start with you. Work with the state broadcaster, Tabe Inonchong. How do you operate as a journalist in this country?
You know, when you called me to talk about this, I was like, this is one subject that I always avoid, you know, because I'm working for a state broadcaster. Somebody said before that, okay, there's journalism in Cameroon, there's journalism in CRTV, and then there's journalism. So now, it's a topic I don't like talking about much, because there's a lot of debate as to who is a journalist. And that's a debate I usually don't like to get into. But now, whatever thing we all decide to do as journalists, we should make sure we respect the rules and the regulations of the profession. I think that is the basis of it all. Journalists, it's interesting to practice journalism in Cameroon. Very interesting. Depending on what side of journalism you are, if it is doing what Moki is doing now, or if it is doing what I am doing, I'm much more into production. I'm not working under pressure. There's nobody telling me, don't say this, don't say that, because my things are general issues which I really do not have roadblocks on them. And there are other people who are faced with the daily realities of the field, and they are expected to behave in a particular way. So the problems cannot be the same for every journalist.
Do you always have access to information as a journalist working with the state broadcaster?
Of course. We have access to information, and in different ways. If access to information means meeting the right people to give you information, I think in CRTV I have the possibility. I say I prefer to say I.
Others may not have.
Others may not have. If access to information means I have access to a particular document, I struggle. I just talked about the internet and all of that. If it has to do with books, I know where to go to. I know who to go to get some kind of books. So in terms of access to information, now I think I have access to information. But now is what do we do with the information?
Okay, let me go. Before I come to what we do with information, you in Tira, you work with the private media, with France 24. Do you have access to information in Cameroon? Are you free working as a reporter in Cameroon?
Well, I would not say we are free. I will not talk about myself in particular. I'll talk about the private media, because before, being an international correspondent, I worked with private media in Cameroon, 2 or 3 media houses, and I would say we are not totally free. You can sit and write whatever you want to write, but you cannot air everything. There are thoughts that people have about certain institutions, about certain individuals, about certain systems in the country that you cannot really air out. Now, I would say practicing journalism in Cameroon, it's as hard as, I don't even know what example to use, but it's very tough, especially in the private media, because like Tabe was saying, for her as a person, she has access to information. She may have access to information when she needs that information, but we cannot say the same thing for every journalist in Cameroon. There are bottlenecks everywhere. There are people who would ask you, they'll ask you where you work, who would you work with, but when you mention a private media, they're not ready to collaborate.
Is it because of the image the private media is giving to the public, or
I would not
Because
say
you simply hate the
it's
private
the
media.
image that the private media has given. I would rather say it is people who do not want to, who are not honest about everything. They don't want to be transparent.
And so
about
giving
everything.
information to the to the public media, they
believe
think
that
will be
the private
protected.
media would tell it as it is. Most journalists in the private media, that's what I think, or those I know, would tell it as it is. But someone who works with the public media, there's this impression we have that they are censored. There's the impression people have. I don't know how true it is. They are censored and will not say everything as it is.
Jacob, you have been reading the newspapers and listening to radio, watching TV. What is the impression you have about us journalists?
Almost the same. Almost the same with that of Indira and many Cameroonians outside there. I think that press in Cameroon is stifled. It's stifled in the sense that even the private press, as Indira said, on the contrary, are not very free, on the contrary. Although they are relatively freer than the public media, but they are not still free because on daily basis we have news that we are expected to see them on the mainstream media. We don't find them. We find them on social media and they are confirmed. The truth is that all the media houses, be it the public nor the private, they know those facts, but they cannot air them.
Can you give an example?
The numerous killings, the killings in the northwest and southwest today, the repeated shootings and burning of houses, the media houses don't. If
I may know, what do you expect from a journalist? Because they have access to those areas. One of the problems they have been complaining of is that they're targeted by both sides when they go to report conflict.
We expect journalists to be very neutral, to be the reporter, to be the informant,
to go to the war front,
to go there, get the information, tell the public, let the public know. Let me say something. You people will not say like Tabe said it here. We have been commenting and analyzing all around media houses today in Cameroon about what is happening in this main house, our house, the CRTV. Appointments have just been made in this house. How many Anglophones are there?
Has it got anything to do with reporting?
It has to do with that. It has to do with that. How many Anglophone journalists will raise up and write a paper on that marginalization on the Anglophone journalists? How many? No one would dare. You dare? Surely the story is known.
I think the question will be what impact would it have to the society? It's not everything.
It would have. It will have because there's a burning issue in Cameroon where Anglophones are crying on daily basis on their treatment by the majority Francophone-led government. It will have an impact that Anglophones, bona fide Anglophones within the house, are also not well treated.
Well, let me just...
Over 15 directors appointed, no Anglophone is competent to own one.
Let me repeat what the GM of CRTV said. He said there is nothing like tribalism. He will not accept tribalism in this house. But we're talking now about the practice of journalism. How do journalists go about getting information and reporting it? You say, do you have a positive, you have an impression journalists report well, or that, like she said, that maybe Tabe, since he worked for the government media, they give press release and she reports the president, that's all.
They don't. Moki, let me just make a short analogy. Before the outburst of the social media, what quality of information and what quantity of information were we consuming from journalists? Almost nothing. The minister has gone to inaugurate this there. There has been meeting of this, conference of this. Those were the news we used to have. But with the outburst of the social media, Cameroonians can enjoy some quality of information today because even the mainstream media have no control. The government has no control over those information because the moment it is happening here, somebody is speaking and sending out there.
Which means that they are very free to say what
we don't need journalists, right? Since the social media is doing it already.
As of now, the journalists had this information. Why are they not giving it out? That's new. Those are news information.
Let's come to you, Professor. You've been listening. You have been very close to the media and
what I say is that probably Joe is sitting on a hot seat to control the varieties of different journalism, if I understand. One, you can have a leftist or rightist journalist, where whatever comes, whatever they find, they throw it out raw. But there are other journalists. Because they found facts that are wrong may temper the facts because the consequence may be disastrous.
Thank you.
That's that.
They call it social responsibility of the journalist.
That is exactly the social responsibility of journalists. Now, there are certain media houses that insult Anglophones. Hate speech, which the Bilingual Commission for Bilingualism has taken up as its main focus. Those media houses continue to exist. There are journalists who come on this platform and tell you that the Anglophones are stupid, thanks to the benevolence of the head of state that they are given such posts. Nothing is done to temper this or to bring these people on book. And that is why I say this role that
I think we'll come to Joe's role. We're still looking at
the commission, because Joe is just probably a referee. And
I want to know, do you respect journalists in Cameroon, Professor?
For sure. For example, the best journalists are researchers like us. Because a journalist doesn't dish out the facts without verifying. Yeah. And I think...
So it's contrary to what you said. It's happening in social media. The journalist verifies the facts.
And one of the things that he should be able to know is that the problem we are facing as journalists is that we all rush to be the one to give the breaking news.
Exactly.
And it is always very dangerous if you want to rush to give the breaking news. Even if they come to your house this morning and tell you 2 people have died in your neighborhood, you should not be quick to pick up your phone, to put it on your phone to say 2 people have died in your neighborhood without you going there to see whether 2 people died, so that you should not just be telling us that 2 people died, what happened, and all of that should be part of the story. But we are all rushing to give the breaking news. I tell you, a story can take 5 months to develop just because you want to fill in all the gaps so that you don't run into trouble, either with the police, either with the law, or say, but at the end of the day, you would have told your story. So that is that's one of the things that make journalists run into trouble. And the role of a journalist is not always to give the breaking news. It is to give the news the way it is. If I come to Professor Nkwi, who is the anthropologist, who is always very receptive when journalists come to him because he is access to information. We're talking about access to information too. Professor Nkwi is always ready each time they call him to come on any platform, be it on any radio station, be it on any television. So he doesn't retain information, and there are many others like him. So now, if you're going to Professor Nkwi to get an information, and he gives you the information, and what you publish is not what Professor Nkwi said, because you think that there was something Professor Nkwi was hiding and he didn't tell you. Yes. And you start assuming, that is, you start multiplying his words, you start saying, well, maybe he meant this, instead of just saying what he said, and you end up running into trouble. In journalism, you don't, if it is to say what it is, if you went for an information to Indira or to Moki, if Moki gave you the information, publish it the way Moki gave it to you.
Now, there is this aspect, people are complaining of killing a story because somebody paid you to do this. You work with a private newspapers, you're working with France 24. How do you rush to publish a story? And if you're influenced, you kill a story. Do you do that because, or to soil somebody's image?
Well, I have never come across
that will nail him. That's what
I have never, personally, I've never faced such a situation where I have to kill a story because A or B doesn't want that story out there. Personally, I have not come across that kind of situation, but I would say it happens in Cameroon. I have seen that times when you see articles are published, especially on newspapers, you see 3, 4, 5, 6 newspapers carrying the same headline.
Or the same
and you begin to ask yourself, are these people in the same newsroom? Did they sit together and decide that, okay, we want to have this headlines, tomorrow, published tomorrow? And then you begin to ask yourself questions. If you go further by reading those articles, you find out that they're saying almost the same thing. And that's not possible in journalism. It's not possible because everybody has an independent mind. You have your own way of thinking. You have your words, the words that you use in telling a story. We all cannot tell the same story using the same words. it's difficult, or it's almost impossible. You cannot have 3-4 people telling this story in the same way.
When you don't have the source, when you don't have, when you're not given the information, how do you go about treating the news?
How do we go about treating the news? We try to go, if you go, you use reference point A and it doesn't work, there's always reference point B or C or D. Somehow you get to the point, and finally, by the end of the day, if you're not able to get the facts, you tell it as it is. You approached A or B or C to get their own side of the story, and they did not give it to you. Instead of, imagining, assuming...
Sources close to...
Yes. Instead of assuming that this is what happened in so and so place, you tell it. If you try to reach out to that person and you're not able to, you're left with no choice.
Or you tell the part of the story that you know, and you make it a developing story, and say you come back to the story and to the story to develop.
It's always better to put it that way than to assume, than to put things in your own words. There you may be telling a lie, like what we see on social media these days. People see I don't know, blood, and you say no, it's not blood, it's water, or you see water and you try to convince everybody that it's blood. People stumble on information, all kinds of information on the internet these days, and they don't know what to make of it.
Now,
because everybody is a journalist. Yes, because everybody now is a journalist. They don't know how to report.
Everybody's journalist. Now, there is an organ where if you feel cheated, you can refer to. That is the National Communications Council. Some people believe it's a toothless bulldog, that it barks more than it bites, and that is there to serve the master, that is the government. Now, Jacob, what do you think about the NCC that George Abonkeng is coming up now?
Well,
chair.
I think it's the NCC. With him being there or not him being there, it's the same ballroom game with the other institutions we have in the country. No institution in Cameroon can fully function freely if we don't go back to the drawing board and dish out powers to institutions the way they're supposed to be. The National Communication Council of Cameroon, all through since its creation, has been lashing on journalists who touch or talk or report or comment on information that affects the regime in place in one way or the other. We have not seen this National Communication Council play the role, even of that role of a neighbor to journalists, not even a protector or a guide to journalists. We have not seen that. For example, I'll quote an example of the National Communication Authority of Ghana. In 2014, there was a burning issue in Ghana. An institution reported a journalist to court, and the National Communication Council wrote to the court that it is their place to handle the issue and punish that institution for what that journalist was. They claim the journalist had done against them. We have not seen that protective rule of the National Communication Council on the journalists.
They're using the whip all the time.
They are like what we call in a local palanganako. Like a shepherd that keeps flogging, and the only thing the shepherd knows is only to flog. Look at the salaries of journalists in Cameroon. Moki, it is a sham. It's a big sham. Let's leave out the public media journalists. Let's look at the private media. All of them. They have complained.
They're not complaining.
They have complained.
Just go ahead.
In fact,
the private media is
basically they are civil servants.
Private,
right?
Private media. When private media, it's not about the private media.
Is it the exception?
The private.
He said the private.
The journalists in general, the journalist profession in Cameroon, those all in these private medias in Cameroon, how much are they paid? You have journalists who go for months without salaries. Some are volunteers for years. Some they are earning 40, 50,000 francs. We thought, like the National Communication Authority of Ghana, that goes to find out before you sign a contract with a journalist. The terms of the contract should be clear, signed and protected by the National Communication Council. We expect the National Communication Council to come up with a board, with a commission or a sub-council that has to look into the contract files of journalists in the private media. Now, we blame the journalists for not giving information or dishing information the way we expect to see them in the public, which we are seeing, as against what Tabe was saying, that you control information, social and all of that. Cameroonians are not tabula rasas. Cameroonians are not tabula rasas. There are news information that no matter how it is twisted, there is a base that everybody knows about that.
Jacob?
So the National Communication Council owes Cameroonian journalists not only the rule of the watchdog that controls them, of their excesses and all of that, but also to go further to see that their contracts are at least up to standards. How much do they pay journalists in the private sector in Ghana? These are countries that all got independence at the same time, around early 1960s.
Now,
our own.
before we go on concluding, let's take this report. Joe Chebonkeng was installed into his function, commissioned by the Prime Minister, head of government. Let's just hear what the Prime Minister asked Joe Chebonkeng to be able to do in the following report with Christian Chatham.
It is the dawn of a new era at the National Communication Council, the Joseph Chebonkeng Kalabubse era. Prime Minister Joseph John Gute has given clear guidelines which the new head of the NCC must follow. The fight against the propagation of hate speech and fake news, and the respect of the ethics of the journalism profession. The Prime Minister has equally demanded of the new head of the National Communication Council to promote the use of national languages and the consolidation of Cameroon's national unity in the media, challenges which the veteran journalist and former president of the Cameroon Baptist Convention will need all his experience to meet, especially in a media landscape with over 600 press organs, 100 radio stations, and some 30 television stations.
We will educate, we will cajole, but we will sanction if need be, because this is an honorable profession. If we inform, educate, and entertain, we have to do that with the social responsibility, which is that of the press.
To safely perform his functions, Prime Minister Joseph John Gute has urged Joseph Chebonkeng Kalabubse to show proof of team spirit and collaboration. During the ceremony, Joseph John Gute voiced the gratitude of President Paul Biya to the outgoing president of the NCC, Peter Esoka, for concerted efforts in sanitizing the media milieu in Cameroon.
Now, Peter Esoka from that report struggled to sanitize the media milieu. Professor Bonkwe, what should Joe Chebonkeng be doing now? How far can he go?
I think if I were Joe, I would spend the first 2 months of my stewardship to understand the rules and regulations and also the pitfalls of his predecessor, because Peter also had a rough time. Mm-hmm. So probably he should learn from the errors, or probably the way Peter did, which did not probably end up in good results. So my advice is first study
maybe the media landscape, because
not only the media, the way things have been done, because like my friend
Jacob
was saying, is that probably is he there to protect the interest and the voice of the state? No, it is both to protect the interests of the state, but also of the stakeholders.
exactly.
If he sits there and understand what his role is as a public servant, serving in a public institutions, and what his rules are, because the media, the commercial media, was not just set up as I don't know, his master's voice. but it was set up to serve the entire media,
Now,
public and private.
Tabe Nonchong, you heard what the Prime Minister asked Joe Chebonken to be doing. One, promote bilingualism and multiculturalism, fight against hate speech. Is that a duty of the media? And when you say that, are you giving instructions to the media? And do you also give them
Duty to the
means to go
media
about
or
them?
to the council?
To the council, sorry, to the council to make sure this is done.
That's one of their missions, because the reason why many people are seeing the National Commission as just being hammering on journalists is because we don't know, we don't talk about the other missions of the council. The role of the council is not just to put the journalists on check, it is to put everything that is practiced on the media on check. Which means even the adverts that we play, even the movies that we broadcast, everything is put on check. It is a regulatory and a consultative, which means as journalists, we too can go towards the council to say, we need capacity building, because that is one of their missions. You cannot tell somebody he's not doing something right if you have never trained him in doing that thing correctly.
So
Capacity building is one of the things that the council, capacity building for journalists.
Exactly.
Because believe me, Moki, 3/4 of us practicing journalism don't know what it is being a journalist. So they're accusing us for things we don't even know about, things we have never even heard about. I'm sorry, you're comparing with Ghana. Ghana, the private media is stronger than the public media, just like in Nigeria, just like in Kenya, just like in Uganda.
And that is what we expect.
Because the people themselves respect they respect their profession. Moki said
no state in the world has built it. No state has built it.
Nobody gives value to what you do.
Build the private sector, and the private sector
Nobody
builds
gives
the
value to what you do if you do not give value to what you say. Moki asked at the beginning, do journalists give value to what they do? Do they even know their importance? Do they even know what they carry? They do not know in Cameroon. That is why, as he said, after observing, there are many things the council has to do, which is make known what they are supposed to do. First of all, their role, make known what they are supposed to do, show to journalists their missions, that they are not there as their enemies. They are there to help them. They help them to do they are there to help them do their job. They are not just there to watch journalists. They are there to accompany journalists. You have talked about salaries, checking their contracts. The role is to accompany journalists and media houses to effectively practice.
Tabe Nonchong, I asked a question you did not answer yet, but I'll come to you with the same question, Indira. The Prime Minister has asked Joe Chebonken and his commission to promote bilingualism, multiculturalism. Are you going to do that?
In other words, ensure that the
ensure
media
this
houses
is
do
media
that.
houses are doing that. Are you
Ensure that
going to
media
do that?
houses do that.
To do
Of
that,
course,
you need a
as
means. I'm
journalist,
asking as a journalist.
Before talking about the means, you need to have the understanding. What is hate speech? What is multiculturalism? What is bilingualism? You have to understand what it is. Now, as an English-speaking journalist, if I decide that, oh, I only want to speak in English, or I only want to read content in English, am I helping myself? That is what we should ask ourselves. We face that problem in Cameroon a lot, especially with journalists of the French or French-speaking journalists who they believe that journalism is only about, or they have to focus only on the French language to be called journalists in Cameroon. Some of them believe that English is just the minimal part of, they don't need English language to practice journalism effectively in Cameroon. That's what some of them believe. And I think if we look at it in that angle, the National Communication Council has to come in, because we should be able to encourage in newsrooms. I know some media houses in Cameroon which they try as much as possible to encourage bilingualism. I'm talking about bilingualism, for example, to be able to make sure that a journalist can conduct an interview in English language or in the French language. If you cannot speak one of the languages, you should at least be able to understand, have a conversation in that language, and develop an article. Maybe I may be speaking to Tabe. She doesn't understand English. She doesn't understand, or she doesn't speak English. I speak French. But we should be able to communicate. If I'm able to communicate in her language, which is French language, for example, then I can have an article. If you do not understand somebody, you cannot put that person's thoughts on paper.
Media houses. It's just to know. I think what the Prime Minister meant was, what is the quota of every representation of Cameroon in our media houses? If you want to talk about promoting cultural diversity, which means every media house in Cameroon must be able to have a percentage of every representation of Cameroon in all the things that they do in their media, be it in their programs and everything.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have about 3 minutes to be together. Let's share the 3 minutes. In 30 seconds each to conclude. What is the take-home message as far as journalism practice is concerned in Cameroon, and as far as the NCC that has at the head Joe Chebonken today should be doing? what is the take-home message?
To me, the first thing Mr. Chebonkeng should do is to make the journalists know, open up to the journalists and say, this is the council, this is what the council does, and this is what the council is expecting of you. And they can do that in many ways. Billboards, flyers, seminars, conferences, any way they can do, first of all, to make the media world know exactly what their role is, because I still believe and I'm convinced that we do not know it.
Professor?
Yeah, I think I share Tabi's, is that the focus on capacity building. The media practitioners, if they go wrong properly, is due to their training. Number two, it can never, this commission can never be what Ghana or Kenya
or Uganda is.
Because this
it's a different context.
No, it's not only, it's a different country. So don't transpose them.
And they don't have the cultural challenges we have of language and
because Cameroon discovered bilingualism probably in 2026. Everybody is talking about bilingual, living together. We have lived together and practiced bilingualism.
Indira?
So,
Prof?
I suppose the Prime Minister that Joe should be interested in promoting bilingualism, which is an option, a political option of the state.
Indira?
I want to see a National Communication Council which is impartial, which hits or cracks down on journalists and media houses, irrespective of them being a private media or the public media.
I hope
in the past 2 years. There are private media which have defied the National Communication Council in the past. They were sanctioned and they did not respect the sanctions. Some even dragged the president of the National Communication Council to court. Yes. We hope to see a National Communication Council which is powerful, which can control the media, which actually exercises its role.
Jacob, please, 15 seconds, Jacob.
Yes, Joe should copy from the goods of Ghana, I repeat, Nigeria, Kenya, where the national communication authorities in those countries have helped their media landscape to be smooth. You should copy the good things from there and make us better. Protect the journalists and protect the interests of the state.
That's where we call it on Press Hour today. We had the contributions of Tabe Enonchong, who is senior journalist with CRTV. We had Indira Ayuk, correspondent of France 24. Jacob Anong, who is a political analyst, and Paul Nkui, Professor Paul Nkui, who is an anthropologist. I am Moki Edwin Kinzika Njaundi. Thank you for watching.
C'est de l'intérieur que vient votre grandeur.
Alors l'équilibre passe par la maîtrise de son